Hello, I'm Coach Frank Allocco, and today I'd like to speak to you about journeys in leadership. Earlier this week, I sent a note to Tommy Appel, one of my former players, to congratulate him on the birth of his daughter, Clara Jane. In my note, I mentioned the amazing blessing of children and how they become our world and enrich our lives. I also acknowledged the fact that when a child is born, the focus of our own lives changes instantly as their life becomes our priority as we provide and worry about them for the rest of our lives. I firmly believe that leadership is truly at its finest when we put others first, when every waking moment is committed to giving our best to love and provide for those entrusted to our care. I believe that this is a sacred duty that actually extends beyond parenting, as we all have the opportunity to embrace the responsibility to lead, mentor, and model for those we are blessed to serve in our roles as parents, coaches, and leaders. Yesterday, October 13th, was my dad's birthday. This was the first birthday that we were not able to celebrate together. Although yesterday was a day that would have seen him at the center of our expressions of love, the truth is he was always most uncomfortable receiving gifts. In fact, at his passing, his attic was filled with clothing still wrapped in plastic. These heartfelt gifts were always appreciated, but truthfully, he was always more comfortable in the simplicity of his own hand-picked clothing. My father lived a profound life, but at his core, he was a very humble man who didn't like the spotlight and rarely did anything for himself. Although his dislike for receiving was quite evident to anybody who knew him, he took great pride in giving. He would send everyone in our extended family a birthday card prior to their special day. Being an incredibly organized man to the very end, the day after his passing saw his desk packed with an organized row of stamped birthday cards, all arranged by the date they were supposed to be mailed. And next to that was another row of sealed envelopes with Christmas gifts to his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. My father wanted to be a priest, but in that time there were many who pursued that vocation, and he was disappointed that he was not selected for the path to the seminary. His best childhood friend was chosen instead, and Vincent Puma ultimately became Monsignor Puma, who would go on to create the Eva's Village Ministry in Newark, New Jersey. Despite my father's disappointment in not being chosen, he was a faith-filled man who was so proud of his Catholic values, and he modeled Christian virtues for the generations that followed him. In fact, his friend, Monsignor Puma, wrote a book on his own life in the church. He sent my father a copy with a handwritten note inside the cover that said, "Mick, you could have been a bishop." My father was a loyal man who would do anything for a friend. He was always the first to appear when a family faced adversity. He was the first to volunteer at Our Lady of Peace Church fairs, at bingo, and often served as an altar boy at Mass whenever needed. He was a public servant who proudly served as a volunteer New Providence fireman. He served as the chief of the department, and he was an officer up to the day he died. He served the town for 67 years. My father was the greatest of teachers, as he not only said the words, he lived them. My brothers and I were blessed. We got to see that work ethic in action as we watched him toil at the factory and do multiple side jobs, putting his own recreational time aside to be able to provide for us. He was a great athlete, but he gave up sports at a very young age so he could do his extra jobs, earning additional income to give us the things that we needed to succeed. He never had a thought of providing for himself. My father was a saver. He was a man who watched what he spent. He was always saving for a rainy day and balanced his checkbook to the penny each month. He took great pride in his children and taught us to be good teammates. His example showed us that we should always put ourselves second for the good of the team. My dad was a wise teacher until his final breath. And although he didn't talk much in his later years, he taught more in his silence than he did with his words. In his later years, my father loved sitting on his porch and putting together 1,000+ piece puzzles. I was always amazed at his discipline, how he could sit there for hours and maintain his focus and concentration, and the patience that he had in creating these unique pieces of art. Each day, after his daily breakfast with his sons and his friends at the Old Glory restaurant in New Providence, he would come home and settle into his routine. Putting together pieces was his day, only fitting, because he was a creator. He was a man who gave everything to his family, his friends, his community, and he brought all of these treasured pieces of his life together to form the amazing puzzle of a life well lived. On the eve of my father's birthday, I reflected upon his extraordinary life, of his commitment to his family, how his life drastically changed at the birth of his 4 boys. I thought of the sacrifices that he made and the love that we shared, and I was desperate. I was longing for a connection with him. As I sat in silence, I remembered the letters that he wrote to me in college. I walked quickly into my garage. I pulled down the attic ladder and I quickly went up those stairs. I searched for hours until I finally found the special treasure of his wisdom. Crouching amongst boxes of Christmas decorations and years of packed memories, I opened the plastic container and became lost in reflection. With the gentle opening of each letter, I found myself being drawn closer and closer to him and to his words. I could hear his love for his family as every letter updated me on my brothers and their challenges and their accomplishments. I could feel his concern for my future when he reminded me to pick up your checkbook at the bank and learn how to balance it. And every single letter contained a simple reminder to make sure you eat and get some rest. In another letter, I understood his fatherly concern, and I could sense his relief as he expressed his thankfulness that I had not followed my homesick plan to hitchhike home from Indiana. He begged me to never consider doing anything unsafe like that again. And as I read on, I could sense his frustration with his own challenges, as he expressed the reality that if I had come home, there was no way for me to get back to South Bend, as our Corvair would never survive the trip to South Bend and back. And the old Chevy had 100,000 miles on it, and that one day he was going to have to find a way to find us a better car. In another letter, I related to his parental challenge when I saw the copy of my grades that he forwarded to me, along with his comment, "Not too good. Maybe you should think twice about going out for basketball this year and concentrate more on your studies." By the way, that simple comment represented the end of my bad grades at Notre Dame. I laughed as I recalled his disdain for pets when he asked, "Have you gotten rid of your cat Buddy yet?" And I smiled broadly in that same letter as I read, "Hey, and don't forget to get a haircut." As I continued my nostalgic visit with my father, I realized that the letters followed the same time frame, all written after one of my dejected phone calls. He would ache at my frustration, my unhappiness during my challenging freshman year. He told me, don't ever lose your confidence. You're going to have bad days, but you're going to have a lot more if you lose your belief. He was certain that things are going to work out for you, but if you keep shaking yourself, the cream can't rise to the top. In a later letter, he told me, don't ever lose your faith, that the best position for a football player is on his knees, looking up in prayer. He told me to be happy, and it will show up on the playing field. And he always reminded me that it doesn't matter if you ever play a minute at Notre Dame. I couldn't be prouder just in the fact that you are there. Every one of my father's letters ended with the same line. Do you need anything? Let me know, no matter what it is. And he would always include a check for $2 in his letters. He would apologize, saying that he wished he could do more. And after many letters, he finally wrote and said, please stop sending the checks back. Just keep the check and have a lunch on me. Being a good son, I listened. I stopped sending him his checks back. So today, I have a collection of his checks that I never cashed. I'm sure that with his attention to detail, the inability to balance his checkbook each month must have caused him great frustration. On October 14th, 1971, the day after his birthday, my father wrote and said, thank you for calling me last night to wish me a happy birthday. You topped the end of a perfect day. And so I ended what would have been his 95th birthday with a silent prayer of gratitude for my father, a man who was a great leader, mentor, and model, a selfless servant who always put himself second to give his best to others. And as I mentioned to Tommy, whether it is the blessing of the birth of a child or the sacred duty to serve others, we are given a gift and an opportunity as the focus of our life changes and we become totally immersed in our commitment to give our best to love and serve those entrusted to our care. Keep listening, keep learning, and strive to be your best. And remember, excellence doesn't take days off.